I want to start with a very important point that came from Lubos, who spoke in the opening session of this conference yesterday, who pointed the geopolitical split of the left, and he pointed that this is one line of the important splits between the what he called old left and the new left in Eastern Europe. I think that this geopolitical split is not just one important line of the splits, but the most important, because what we have now, this kind of geopolitical split of the left, starting from the beginning of Ukrainian crisis, is can need to be defined as one of the main challenge for the international left in the last 20 years. This split somehow opened the way to understand some deep problems of international left itself, because it somehow reproduce the logic of the most of the international left that, from my point of view, very deeply rooted in the consciousness of the Cold War. So even in the Cold War, in the real Cold War, not this new Cold War that immediately provoke and give a new life to these lines of geopolitical split. So in the real Cold War, international left and even the critical left, even that part of the left who were from the beginning not on the side of the Soviet Union, were forced to take a position. Were forced to take a position by the logic of the international confrontation, where any kind of third position, any kind of non-alignment can't survive according to the logic of Cold War confrontation. This logic of Cold War, the main danger of this logic was somehow rooted is what you can call the nationalization of or somehow geopoliticalization of the universal definitions. If you remember the famous critics of the human rights concept from Hannah Arendt, she wrote on this very well-known problem of the people without a state. So the people who can address not of any other identity, not of any other right, than the just basic human right. So it means that they address to something that had no any real subjectivity. So that is somehow was just a humanity which had no real state, which had no real subject that can defend and can guarantee their rights. So the Cold War came as a situation when every kind of universal rights and even the human rights itself were appropriated by one or another camp. So the human rights get their own homeland, and this homeland was the Western Bloc. So if you stood for the human rights as the universal definition, that means that you took side of the West. If you stood for national self-determination, it means that you took side of the Eastern Bloc. So, and you see that the strategy of that split, that forced choice of the left in the real Cold War. It was somehow rooted in this appropriation of the universals, of the universal values. Even the personal choice, the personal freedom, was also appropriated by one of the sides in the Cold War. If you remember the position of greatest intellectuals of 40s and 50s, who were forced to choose sides, who were forced to choose the position, they were forced because they were committed to these universal values, and because they have to choose what universal value for them is the most important. You know that in that period, this period where the whole generation of the left were forced for this choice, they were so-called non-communist left. So that part of the left-wing critics of Stalinism who finally choose the side of the West against the Soviet Union. They moved to that side from a kind of the third position, from the some idea of independent position between the camps, which was somehow predominated of the idea of the freedom of choice. For example, if you remember the personal transition of people like Arthur Koestler, they exactly did the same way. So only because they take the personal freedom, the freedom of individual choice as the most important for them, so they were converted to the side of the West and later became like openly agents of the CIA, because the CIA became the only one force that really guarantees them even the personal right for expression, the personal freedom. That strategy of the forced choice created some very specific structure of consciousness, which was very, very deeply rooted in the, I think, whole history of the international left during the second half of the last century. And when the Ukrainian crisis started, these kind of structures of consciousness, they immediately come true. They come true even without the exact situation that provoked that kind of forced choice that the left were confronted like in 40s or 50s. So you see that in this geopolitical split, the international left immediately took sides, even without the situation where both of the sides of the conflict really represent any kind of alternatives to each other. So this feeling of the Cold War was something that provoked this completely, from my point of view, fake choice. Yes. So what is the essence of this logic of campism? The essence of it is the feeling that the left theirself can be any kind of independent subject in the coming conflict. That when this kind of dramatic events happen, you should take a side of one or another big powers only because you can't play any kind of independent role in the events. And the energy and aggressivity used by the one or another part of the left somehow was the compensation of their deep feeling that they can be presented somehow as the really third force in the situation. I think that even the defining of this independent third position of the left start, even if our forces are very limited for today, should be started even with what you can call the discursive struggle, the struggle for exact definitions, for the struggle for exact values that immediately appropriated by one or another side in the conflict. For example, you see how easily powers, governments, elites manipulated such definition as fascism, imperialism, national interest, all these kind of definitions that should come as the field of the struggle where left should be a very active and important part. So I think that from this you can define this very important discursive struggle for the definition of imperialism. It's very important to remember that in a famous Lenin piece of imperialism, which was written in the most intensive phase of the First World War, the imperialism was not defined as the quality or as the characteristic of one or another nation. So Lenin, even in like 1915, 1916, when this piece was written, he didn't use the definitions like German imperialism or French imperialism or Russian imperialism, not because this imperialism were not existed or not presented, but because for him it was very important to give the completely other explanation of imperialism than the explanation coming from the war propaganda of different sides of the old imperialist conflict. So it was the time when even the definition of imperialism was in the like, center of the propagandistic manipulation. But for Lenin it was important to show that imperialism is not a kind of special national quality of one or another country, but this is a quality of capitalism itself. This is a quality of this exact stage of capitalism, and that was much more important that the presentation of any concrete imperialism in the world imperialist war. Basically, from the beginning of the Marxist debates of imperialism, from the beginning of 20th century, there were, in the same time, the different line of even the explanation what this imperialism is about. It was a line that explained imperialism not as a quality of capitalism itself, but as the special character of one or another state. And you see how, for now, this term imperialism was completely appropriated by this other line which explained imperialism as the kind of special character of Russia, for example, coming from all its history, even the pre-capitalist history. I give you just one example. This year was published a book by a guy named Van Harpen under the name Putin Wars, which give the explanation of the aggressive character of Russia coming from its essence, coming from its history. So his explanation basically, this book, by the way, I think it's already translated in Polish as well as on most of the European languages, because even this book was written in the end of the last year, it's already predicts that it will be possible Russian aggression against Ukraine. So, okay. So in this book, he gave a picture that what is the specificity of the Russian imperialism? The specificity of Russian imperialism is that during all the history of Russia, there was no clear borders between metropole and colonies, which create the situation when the national state can be transformed to a non-imperialist powers like most of the Western countries. For example, US or Britain, they are not imperialist because they already don't have their own colonies. But the imperia is a kind of the exact form of existence of the Russian state. So during all its history, Russian state moved from what he called pre-imperium and post-imperium form. So the pre-imperium form, like provoke, move Russia to expansion, and after the defeat of this move from all the cultural nations, Russia tried to reform itself without a big success, and then moved to the next phase of the pre-imperium form. So tried to rebuild somehow its empire. According to this explanation, the internal autocratic character of Russian politics and external expansion is just two sides of one coin. This kind of explanation, that is something that we really confront, and that is something that we really have to resist. And using even the legacy of Marxism, of Marxist thought. Even in the discussion that we had here during this conference, it was clear that even the definitions which were used by the leftists with analysis of the current situation come not from our own perspective. It's not kind of our own language that we should to use to explain what is really going on. The other point that I want to that I have to skip somehow, it's a point what is the real nature of Russian approach in Ukraine. So I think that, in fact, if you take into account the experience of the Marxist understanding from the beginning of the century, it was the project of reunification of the post-Soviet space under capitalist basis. This project came from the, you can say, beginning or the middle of 2000s, and what is happening in Ukraine, what is happening in Crimea, it's not the expansion of this project, but it's logical end. So it's logical end because after the direct military intervention, after the annexation of Crimea, any kind of reconstruction of the post-Soviet unity or reunification of the post-Soviet space under the new capitalist character is failed. So that is, I think, is a very important point. And the last thing that I want to say that if you remember in Trotsky autobiography, My Life, he told about his meeting in Switzerland in the first months of the beginning of the First World War with one of the prominent German social democrats who came from the generation of Bebel and all these old generation of founders of the Social Democratic Party. And he asked him, as the authority in the Marxist politics, what is his prognosis, what is his perspective of how things will go on with the war. And he answered that the perspective is quite clear. So in 2 months we will beat France. In 3 months we will beat Russia, and in half a year we will give Europe a strong German order. So in fact, this kind of prognosis was in the same time the diagnosis of the end of the exact generation of the left. It was the clear mark that something should be seriously changed. Even with the change of the names, with the change of the approaches, with the change of the whole structure of thinking. And that change happened after the First World War, during the Russian Revolution and so on. And I think that now we're also faced on this kind of moment, when we have to change this like way of thinking that was somehow created by the Cold War and become our bad legacy even for now, or we will simply disappear in this logic of campus confrontation, because even for now you have the situation when the leftists who are, I don't know, in the West confronting each other with the rhetorical, critical support of one or another side, in Ukraine or in Russia, they start to participate even in the violent actions against each other. And you have this situation when people who came from the left groups in Ukraine or in Russia, they're simply fighting on the different sides in the military conflict in eastern Ukraine. And probably now, when we're sitting here, one anarchist, shoot other communist by, gun in a real military conflict. So I think even if you take into account this situation, which became a part of reality, you will understand what kind of task, what kind of historical challenge we face by now. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, I agree very much with what Ilya said, and some parts of my prepared talk actually almost repeating what he has just said, so I'll try not to repeat the brief, as we don't have actually so much time. So it was supposed to be a talk on the lessons for international or internationalist left for all that we have to derive now from Ukrainian Maidan, and I think that the questions which Maidan posed to the left are not just the questions for Ukrainian left, but indeed the questions for the global left, and he actually made this point very well. What we see now with the Ukrainian left is that it's after Maidan and after the following events as well, with the war and Russian intervention, the left is deeply split and up to exactly the violent clashes between each other. It's weaker than before. It didn't get any significant gains, even those who were genuinely trying to participate in the mass mobilization, either in Maidan or anti-Maidan. And the left got more, actually, the losses. Many of them are depoliticized, in apathy. Some actually went to work for the government or into the pro-governmental institutions in the Kiev government. And so some of the left actually participate in the separatist republics in the east. Some groups have immigrated, like Pert by Union. Some are under strong repression, some feel more or less like informal pressure and actually meeting the problems even to raise any critical concern about the current politics and to speak from some independent position. And so what can we do to avoid this situation in other countries or later in Ukraine precisely? So there are 3 points which I want to make. The first point is about a lesson about revolution. Ukrainian Maidan was not the only event of this kind where there is a mass mobilization, but it doesn't have a genuine leftist, if not leadership, but at least a hegemonic organization which may seriously try to influence the political consequences of this mobilization. Before Maidan, we saw the revolutions or mass mobilizations in Arab countries, and some went into the rotation of elites, so the mobilization were able to overthrow the previous leaders, but to put into the power positions the leaders from the traditional position very far away from the concerns of the masses which were actually mobilizing. And here we need to make a clear point that, speaking exactly about the discursive dimension and struggle for the language, we have to be very serious about our understanding of the revolution. And for our understanding, it's not just any anti-governmental mass movement, but it's necessarily must mean a rapid fundamental transformation of either social structure and institutions, or at least political structure and institutions. And in this case, let's call it a political revolution. But in any way, in any case, this is not just change of people in the power offices, but it's fundamental and rapid transformation of structures and institutions, systemic changes. And then there is a second question, a second point. If we, at the left, we understand without any illusions, our real position, our real political resources, why we need to participate in these movements if we cannot make serious political consequences, and if we try to participate there, how we actually can make this political influence on them. Because speaking about the independent position, that's not only a question about language, that's not only a question about the independent discursive position, although these are indeed important questions. But this is a question also about the organizational structures, about material resources to make an influence, about the tools and resources to make this position really important, at least even to be heard in the masses, and having some real political consequences after that. So this touches to very popular discussions in the global left as well about the horizontal structures, about network structures, about do we really need political parties? Do we really need to take power in order to change the world? This is the titles of some popular books, Holloway, for example. And in the end, this position that we actually do not need our independent organization with our independent agenda for the left, it's a position that disarms the left. It leads to the situation when in the critical moment, when you have the mass mobilization, you meet it with a number of split, dispersed, very small groups, with a strong rivalry between each other, so with, unable to make any serious influence in the movement. But even if you look more attentively into what happened onto my country, there is a big discussion about the actual significance of the far right in the Maidan movement. But and what the critics of this argument about their significance say that the far right are actually a small part of this movement. The right sector may, at least in Kiev, may mobilize something like 500 people compared to several 100,000 mobilizations for December rallies in Kiev. But those guys, those 500 people, were indeed able to make a really critical influence in some critical moments, for example, in starting and sustaining the violence in the middle of January, which then escalated the events. And they were more important in the seizure of administrative buildings in other parts than in Kiev. Maidan was not just a Kiev phenomenon, that's the point that many don't really understand, that even more important events might have happened in the western Ukraine, where indeed from the middle of January, Yanukovych didn't have real power. And even such kind of groups of organized, active, mobilized, of several hundred people, but working onto some strategic aim, they can make an influence. They can, even if not like winning hegemony, even if not coming to power, but at least gaining a huge notoriety, gaining resources. And you should also understand that, for example, the right sector, which is very famous now, it gained like world notoriety. Before middle of January, these were completely fringe marginal groups, which were known only probably to the specialists of the Ukrainian far right and to the leftists who were meeting them in the streets and fighting them. Before middle of January, they were almost like us, not really stronger. Now this is a political party which is able to participate in the elections and able to, if not to come to the parliament, but at least to gain like 2% of the votes, which is something that's completely impossible for any genuine leftist force in Ukraine. And, but then if you understand that we need an independent political organization with independent leftist agenda, then of course this is a question about the contents of this agenda. And if we are not to choose between competing imperialist camps, then what should be our actually substantive contents of what we propose, what we can propose to the masses, what should be our position here. And I think it's, now we deal with the problem not of just the Cold War, not of just the geopolitics, this is also the problems which touches the tendencies and ways of degradation of the new left of the 1960s. And those kind of left politics and theories which emerged in the age of, first of all, economic boom and economic growth, and also over strong hegemony of the United States, which were building this hegemony on the ruins of European colonial empires. And here we have actually kind of two camps. On the one hand, postmodern liberal left, which was usually emphasizing more and more so-called post-material non-class oppression of women and minorities, In the same time, more and more downplaying the central role of the class conflict in the capitalist society, which was, of course, connected with the gradual demobilization of the working class since the 1970s and going 1980s with the weakening of the trade unions and decrease in the number of strike actions in the West. And in the same time, while they were emphasizing these non-class dimensions of oppression, they were very tempted actually to give legitimacy to neoliberal transformation, and this transformation is very well analyzed in the well-known book on the new spirit of capitalism by Boltanski and Capello, supporting the language of flexibility, mobility, self-expression, which was very well going hand in hand with what the neoliberals were actually suggesting, and becoming this part of the had become very well integrated into the governing structures of the Western societies. And in Ukrainian situation, it was a number of very weird arguments when the left were indeed trying to justify and defend one of the camps in this struggle. For example, like making the argument when okay, we have this competition between the EU and Russia, and Ukraine has to make a choice where to integrate, either to sign this association agreement with the European Union or sign the customs unions with Russia. And we both understand these are not actually the best choices, but just all other things are equal. EU is slightly better in gender equality. EU is better in form of democracy and defending the human rights. And Russia is worse. So yeah, we have to make this real political choice and support the EU. And later, when they met the anti-Maidan mobilization, they didn't see any progressive element in it, any progressive element in the rebellion against the new neoliberal nationalist government. And when, for example, people in the eastern Ukraine were shouting Russia, Russia, this Russia slogan had for them almost the same meaning as Europe had for the people who mobilized during Maidan. So with Russia, they connected their aspirations for higher pensions and higher wages. And this is, again, taking this logic of comparing bad choices and trying to find some minor advantages or minor disadvantages. From this point of view, from the point of view of Eastern Ukrainian working class, you might at least try to argue that, yeah, for these people, higher pensions, higher wages are something more important than gender equality. Although I'm very much the problem is that these both logics are, in the final instance, are flawed. And on the other hand, contrary to this postmodern liberal left, you have the degradation of anti-imperialist left, which was focused, first of all, on the national oppression and fighting the dominant American imperialism, while gradually and more were ready to support any anti-American force, however reactionary it might be. And losing in this way the class dimension of anti-imperialism. And the arguments which now defend Putin and Russian policies are probably very well known for you. And yeah, many people on the left are genuinely trying to understand Russia, to understand their legitimate interests in Eastern Europe, how they call it. And that's a very well-known story. And what is also interesting about this both camps of degraded New Left is that they, while they emphasize either non-class oppression or a national question and anti-imperialism, they are in the same time usually deprive any significance to the reciprocal question. So for the postmodern liberal left, it's usually the imperialism question is kind of like a pseudo-problem. It's not a problem, it's something that just allows this third world dictatorship to justify the rule and to oppress the local people, and also to impose all this homophobic anti-gender equality laws and so on. And for many people on the anti-imperialist left, there's all this bullshit about gender equality and LGBT and so on, just to split the working classes and to legitimize the US hegemony. Actually, the real problems indeed are appropriated by opposing camps. And so what should be our primary agenda in now? And here, I think we need to compare not the situation we face is not actually the Cold War situation, but more probably the situation which was more similar to the pre-First World War, to the beginning of the 20th century, when we face the consequences of the global economic crisis after 2008. We face the age of declining US hegemony, and in this situation the other imperialist rivals are emerging. So the conflict between US and Russia could be better understood from, again, like taking Lenin's language, when he was talking about the old imperialist predators and young imperialist predators, the new imperialist powers which are emerging, which are rising, and they demand some spheres of influence. They defend the interest of their capitalist ruling class, and this was the political economic basis of the First World War. This is something what we might see in the coming future. And in the same time, we see the fragmenting political structures in peripheral states and continuing growing class struggle, but usually this class struggle is expressed in non-class language. And now for the left politics, it's primarily important to emphasize the centrality of class exploitation and class struggle in the capitalist society. And for our theory, primarily importance has a class analysis, understanding of the social conflicts from the point of precise of production of property rights and and of productive relations, and how various social groups are unequally related in at this point. And we have to emphasize this against competing imperialism and competing nationalism. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that we should just ignore or put as secondary all other like non-class or national questions. On the other hand, we have to give a really historical materialist perspective on non-class oppression, on oppression of minorities, and at the same time on the imperialism. Revealing the political economic basis of these power structures and struggles, and from political point of view, we need to try to embed them into the struggle against capitalism, which is the primary objective for the socialist movement. And if you don't do this, I'm afraid we will end as Ukrainian left, or with all these splits and between competing imperialisms and nationalist camps, playing as just not as independent actors in the common mobilizations, but just as left wings of equally bad imperialist camps without possibility to make any political influence on in the common political structures.